So, it's the start of the tax year, and PhysiQuip are really keen to help you get off to a flying start in April 2025. So, we are offering to cover your entire VAT on any technology purchased in this time, so the whole 20%. The reason we're doing this is because there's a lot going on in the world at the moment, a lot of uncertainty in the markets, and this can mean that people do hesitate or not want to spend money. However, we know that if you want this technology, the sooner you can get it in, the sooner it's going to be beneficial for you, for your clients, and the business. So we want to help build that momentum. It helps us as well keep moving things forward. We're already placing large orders, and we'd love to kick things off. So please get in touch. We'll cover all of your VAT for any order purchased in April 25, and we'd love to help you.
Hello and welcome. Today I am joined by Eddie Smith, who is Managing Director at Six Physio. Eddie, how are you doing?
I'm good, Andy. Yeah, how are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Now I had a quick look on the website before, and I'm intrigued to hear some of these '90s footballers that you've got excellent knowledge of.
Well, give us a quiz. I mean, this is coming from okay. So this is coming from our website where it asks, "What are you better than 90% of people at?" And I think that's what I put down. So yeah, I'm very good. I'd need to see the picture and I could give you the name, but
Right.
it's there for whatever purpose. It's there in the back of my mind. 90s footballers, obscure ones. I could tell you if it comes up in a pub quiz, I'll be okay.
Oh no, I love it. I love it. So who do you support then?
I'm a Liverpool fan.
Well, we might be ending this early. I'm an Everton fan, and we obviously had the game on last night.
Did.
Yeah, I mean, even I'm not going to say that wasn't a red card.
It was, do you know, I missed that. I've got a 1 year old, so I was kind of engaged at the start, and I got into the game 20 minutes, and I only saw that at halftime. And do you know what? I could believe it, Andy, because it's not a surprise. There's a lot of that happening. I
Yeah,
could believe the decision.
yeah, no, yeah. I mean, VARs. I mean, that's a whole other topic. But
We can
yeah,
talk
so
about it
like,
if you want.
well, I mean, it's yeah. I enjoyed Virgil van Dijk's thing. Like, he obviously absolutely that just despises Everton because like they
Yeah,
yeah
yeah,
from like the Pickford challenge.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
So yeah, so like, what is it your fascination with '90s football? It's also my favorite era, I would say, of like the Premier League, the sort of that late '90s piece.
I think, and do you know what, Andy? I think it's supposed to. I think I was supposed to be a footballer. That's what it is. I think it's that's what I'm harping back to. So my background is in football. At some point, I was as a footballer. I won't spend the whole podcast talking about that. At some point, I had aspirations like everyone else, and I think the final nail in the coffin for my football career is when I ruptured my ACL. Like a lot of guys, that's the end. It's a difficult injury to come back from. Now, the fact that that happened when I was 36 probably was the final nail in my Premier League ideas. So my dream was over at the age of 36. But as a youth growing up, that was my first intro to physio really as well. So I think like many people who got into the physio thing was from sport. So it's not so much that I have an obsession with 90s football, but I think that was of my formative years. That's what I spent a lot of time doing was playing and watching football, and that was my first love, my first passion. The the Italian football at the time as well was the big thing. So you get up on a Sunday morning and watch that. But that's yeah, that's more of a pub quiz piece, really.
Yeah, Gazzetta Football Italia is one of the best shows. It was like that was game
Maybe
changing,
ever,
wasn't it?
maybe ever. Yeah,
Yeah,
fantastic stuff.
no, it was. So in terms of where did you grow up?
I'm from Dublin, so I grew up in Dublin, grew up in Ireland, and studied there. I tried to get into physio as a from school in Ireland. I'll say it's very difficult. You've got to be very academic to get into physiotherapy in general, but in Ireland even more so. I think it's a difficult process. So I didn't get in. So like many people, I went through the sports science route in Ireland and university. So grew up, did my university thing there, stayed at home in Dublin, and then after the sports science degree, I kind of thought, okay, what's next? Had ideas of working in sport, but went into physio then at that point and did a master's over in Southampton, so moved away and been back and forth from Ireland and England since, and ultimately settled in London then after a couple of years working back and forth between Ireland and London.
So what are your thoughts on that thing? You're saying it's very academic to get into physio, and that's something which has come up a
Yeah,
lot in these conversations, whether it's with like Andy Williams or, James
yeah,
Calder. Everyone has talked about it, that actually the academic piece is
yeah.
quite restrictive on things. And that, what do you think of how academic that it is to get into physio?
I think it's dreadful. I think it's a poor system. In Ireland, it's very intense. Medicine and physiotherapy, it's a product of supply and demand in general. So it's a filter. In the absence of a better filter, it's the filter that they use for access to universities. So what you end up with is a lot of really high performing academics entering medicine, entering physiotherapy as well. And it might not necessarily set you up for that career, to be fully honest. I think you need to be bright, you need to be reasonably switched on, but it's about relationship management. It's about the EQ, if you like, more than the IQ in my mind. So I think it's a shame. Certainly when I did the master's qualification in physio, and I say master's just the pre-reg to get into physiotherapy in the UK, about half of the course had dropped out by the time we'd finished. As they get into the course, the entry is attractive. There's something about um, accessing an in-demand course, and it's a tick. You're 18, 19, 20, whatever, getting into university. You don't know what you want to do, so you end up finding yourself in something that's highly academic, and the practicality and the reality of physiotherapy. There's an academic element to it, absolutely, but those who are really successful and really progressive in it, it's about emotional intelligence. And I'm not a huge fan of that term, to be honest with you, in a finite way, but it's about that awareness and that ability to connect with people and problem solve. So yeah, I do struggle with the more heavily academic side of physio. I think it doesn't necessarily cross over to what we might think of as a good physio. I think you can be very theoretically sharp, you can know all the principles, there's a clinical basis to that, it's important, but if you can't communicate with people and can't problem solve and can't empathize, there's no point in knowing all that kind of academia. So I think it's a poor system. I don't have a solution off the top of my head, unless it's going to be a more of an interview process that incorporates in relationship problem solving and communication. I think it's a product of not really knowing what you want to do when you're 18, 19 anyway. So I think some of the best physios I know are people who've retrained. Some of the best physios I've come across, the most passionate, the most switched on, they've done something else, had a bit of life experience, come back and done really well. And at Six, we've got a fantastic team at Six, a fantastic team of people. And what we end up seeing is a lot of Antipodeans, and I think they're very well renowned in the UK as well-trained physiotherapists. Their system is a little bit different. I think the fact that they end up coming over here halfway across the world, they have a bit about them. They have life skills, they've got a bit of maturity, they're quite resilient. It's a tough job. We work in the private sector. It's no doubt the same in the NHS, in the public sector. It's a really tough, intense job. You're dealing with people often in pain, with problems. You've got to solve those problems. They're looking to you for solutions. You have to empathize. You've got to think on your feet, and you've got to move them on in maybe 30 minutes. And it's a tough gig. And I don't think academia itself sets you up for that by a long way.
Yeah, I fully agree on it, and I think it is quite challenging, because it's like the skill set from the academic standpoint is completely it's at the other end of the spectrum. So actually, you're dealing with people all the time.
All
That's
the
pretty
time.
much all you're doing. It's got that element, and whether that's in elite sport, NHS, private, whatever it is, it's definitely not geared around that. Like a good friend of mine, Andrew Macaulay, is another Irish person. So he runs courses basically on communication,
Fab.
and I think he's just started a podcast, which he definitely would be great to get you on that. So I'll introduce you to him. And all of that stuff it's around literally just when people come in, how are you doing? Rather
Yeah.
than whatever that condition is, understanding the person before the
Yeah.
condition or whatever it may be.
Yeah, I
Um,
think so. And we'll certainly say, look, we treat people, not problems. It's never really about the knee or certainly in our practice where we work in private practice, you're dealing with that person. You can do the most academically driven, correct approach to managing a knee, an ankle, or whatever. You've got to connect with that person. It's about connecting with people. Um, so yeah, I think it's a combination of a baseline level of academia. Certainly, you need people who are bright. You need people who are switched on, people who can be problem solvers. But you need a bit of life experience, a bit of care, a bit of passion. A genuine interest in people. You can't really fake that, and I don't think you can massively learn it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's interesting. Is there any way of, because you obviously you need to be academic as well, because there's not always that much support from I'm a big fan of growth development CPD, but outside of just the clinical piece as well. Is there
Yeah.
something missing in that space?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's definitely a gap there. We see a lot of CPD, particularly if I stick with physiotherapy, there's a lot of CPD geared towards clinical focused best practice of management of X condition or the most contemporary approach to Y. There's very little out there from a structured, formal approach to relationship skills. A lot of it is just quite siloed. This is the thing we're working on. This is the best practice for tendon management, etc. Part of that is physio is a very, very broad spectrum. We think about what we do in an MSK setting, we deal with all sorts. So there is a huge amount to know and a huge amount of knowledge needed. So we need to have that academic basis. Now, we'll do a lot of training in-house. Actually, we've curated programs for leadership development programs, management training, if you like. We'd call it the Rising Stars program, and that's very much about self-development, but it's also about people skills, communication. We put a big emphasis on that, the relationship side of things, and where we operate, Andy, in the private space, we're very much a customer service business. We think about we're a medical business, of course we are. We're a physiotherapy business, of course we are, but we're very much a service business. We're looking after people. It's experience. It's really about connection. So yes, there's definitely a lack or a need for more formal training for sure. I think within our team, we have a lot of people who find themselves in leadership positions or management positions, myself included. I've done different things over the years. And we prioritize promoting good people. We give good people opportunities, we give them support. But everybody that we've got in a leadership position has come from a physio background. They're clinicians, and we don't necessarily have a formal management training program. It raised the question, do we need one? They're doing pretty well. So would they do better if they had it? But I think that support is really important. So we do internal training programs around that. And it's a big emphasis for us. We cover topics like difficult conversations, or how to deal with an employee who's got a problem at home and they're challenged at work, or something as transactional as a pay review, or how do you talk to someone when they're not performing to the standards, or how do you deal with a complaint? These are all things that you can train for, and we do. But a fundamental basis in this is communication, and we're big on that, and we have to be.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's really good to hear that, because I think it's such an interesting time in that private space, because it's been so dominated by the NHS, which is a completely different industry, really, even though it's the same thing, that the way things work. Like, what's your approach around that? That is, because my perspective on it is from the NHS, it's been so geared around that from a physio perspective, that from a sales perspective, or asking for money, how do you manage that, being a company, a commercial company? How do you manage that into training or growth, or for your team?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, Andy, and it's a really hot topic at the moment, not just for us, but across the industry. There's a couple of pieces to it. I think we do some workshop on this, and we talk about this. I talk openly with people about this. We need to be a sustainable business. We won't shy away from that, but that can't be our full focus and our ends, if you like. The financial side of what we do is our means, not our ends, and I'm really clear on that. I think we've just recently created a employee value proposition to contextualize or really formalize what it is to work at Six Physio. What does that look like? What do you get as an employee, really? And some of it is centered on community. You're part of a great team. Some of it is centered on compensation. You've got a good earning potentials at Six. We have good bonus structures for people. There's that revenue side of the business. And career progression is the other element of that, the other tenet of that. And underlying all of that is we talk about, let's not forget to have some fun along the way. So our culture is really, really important. Now, I've got a job to do, as we all do in leadership roles, to balance a great place to work and successful business, sustainable business. And that's my job. Fundamentally, that's what I see as the job I do now as MD. So it's an ongoing process, and it's something that is often a little bit uncomfortable for the physios, I would say. The sales idea, or this idea of sales. Some of it's about contextualizing what do you mean by sales? Are you talking about images of sleazy second-hand car salesman kind of vibe? And that's typically what people will talk about when we have workshops and say, look, draw what sales looks like, put it down on paper, what you do. And we end up getting this kind of sleazy, ill-fitted suit guy trying to sell you something you don't need. And what I would kind of prescribe to is the idea of telling, not selling, and this ability of communicating value. So look, health is the most important thing fundamentally, and we have to ground ourselves in that. There's nothing more valuable than our health. There's nothing. You can talk about that. So if we really center ourselves in what are we actually doing here? Is this worth someone putting their hand in their pocket and maybe paying 150 quid for an hour with me? Invariably, our physios are really passionate, really caring. They want to help people. They're in physio because they want to be helping people. If they wanted to make tons of cash, they'd probably be in a different business or a different industry for sure. So we've got work to do to just making sure people feel comfortable with what they're doing in a very authentic way. We're helping people live fuller, better lives. We're not necessarily, let's not get carried away. We're not doing brain surgery. We're not saving lives as such, but let's not minimize the impact of what we're doing either. We're having a fundamentally really positive impact on many people's lives. And what a great thing to be part of. That's very meaningful work. And you have a responsibility then as a physiotherapy to communicate that value with the customer or the patient, however you want to deem it, who's in front of you. You've got to know your value. You've got to know the alternatives for that person. What's it worth to not be in pain? Quite a lot at times. What's it worth to be able to play with your grandkids or coach your little boy in football without your knee holding you back? It's worth anything, and I think that's important. It's an important piece to just contextualize what is value. What are we doing? We don't need to shy away from that. We're not just subservient. We're in service industry. We're helping people, but we're not subservient. We're offering really good quality. And as long as we're really clear that our quality is really high, the problems that we solve for people are really valuable, we've got to tell them about it. We've got to say, look, this is probably going to take you 3 months and you're probably going to benefit from 5, 6, maybe 7 sessions. How's that going to work for you? Help me understand where you're at with that. It's about qualifying that relationship. So the short answer, it's a long process. It's an ongoing process. It's something that is contemporary. It's not niche for us, no doubt, at Six Physio, but we've got to make sure that we fundamentally understand the value of what we're doing, and we define it and we can name it and we can communicate it.
Yeah, I mean, it's brilliant to hear you say all that stuff, because I think that is so key to do it. Like, if I look at, again, the last 5 years has changed massively, not just because of COVID, just with various things at the NHS. And going back to the original point about education for people, it's so deep rooted that you don't pay for physio, and then all of a sudden now you're running a big company where you need to make money, and you need to have, how do you take those people with you rather than just being, right, this is what you're selling, and you've got this shockwave and you're going to charge this for it. It's empowerment, or that support and development for it.
I think it's really important. And you talk about empowerment, I think that's really it. I think if we can just visualize that what we're doing is not the physio thing. Let's be frank, nobody wants to necessarily be in physio. People are there, they don't want to be there. No one wants to be in pain or have a problem. So we're selling them a destination, in a sense. We're talking about a future version of themselves. In the same way that BA's ads will show holiday destination, you're on the beach. You're paying £1,000 to go to, I don't know, Jamaica, South America, whatever. You're not paying £1,000 to sit on a plane cramped up for 12 hours. You're not paying for that. You're paying for the destination. You're paying for that experience. And that's what we need to get across as well. What are we actually doing here?
Yeah, no, it's really good to hear that, because I think that's just really pivotal, because for us, we're a sales company. However, again, who isn't a sales company? What company doesn't have any sort of commercial aspect to it? And I think you mentioned as well, being really authentic and how you communicate this, and just be honest and real about what we're all doing.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if it's unauthentic, if you're selling things that are not valuable to that person, you're in the wrong game. I think that's it. So we can become really comfortable with the pricing that we put on things, the problems that we solve, and what we're selling is got to be valuable, or else we're in the wrong game.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's really good. And then, so for you, then, so you'd come over, you've done your masters to physio. What was your goal at that point?
So probably at that point, I was thinking about football. So I was thinking about getting back to football again. That was my big passion. I wanted to play, I wanted to be, I had ideas I could do it, like every other young guy. And then I thought, Joe, I'll stay in football. I'll do the physio thing and I'll stay close to that. I like the culture, I like the environment. I want to be part of a high performing team. I like that idea of competition. So that was what I wanted to go and do. And then I thought about pursuing that really further. I registered and did another course in sports physio then at a Bath to try and progress into advanced practice. At that time, there was some challenges around jobs. You think about that was during one of the financial crashes, and I think there was just a real challenge around work, and that was one of the reasons why I left Ireland. Actually, just no jobs going around for new grads at that time. Not even in the HSE, which is Ireland's equivalent to the NHS. You couldn't get a job. There was a ballot system. Actually, you could register for a job, and whatever job came up in the country, you got offered that one. If you said no, you went back to the back of the queue, and you just think, oof, that's it. Ireland's not a huge country, but that's pretty challenging. And so I wanted to get into football and I wanted to work in football. And I started doing some academy work with Southampton while I was there. A friend of mine got me involved and, do the matches. And I absolutely hated it. I really hated it. I just found myself feeling, there was a moment where I was working with young kids, great kids, great bunch, they were doing their thing. I actually felt a bit jealous. I thought, I want to play. And I just thought, this is not for me. And I thought, well, this is really unhealthy that I found myself in this position. I'm the problem here. I need to remove myself from this. This is not going to be healthy for me to work in this environment and to be on call to, can you do this massage? Can you do this tape? I can't be coming in here with ideas of myself. Or it was just quite a confronting moment actually, where I just thought, this is not for me.
Yeah,
So
that's it's really interesting. Yeah, so
got
you've
out.
got to acknowledge that unhealthy,
No, it was definitely wrong. I thought, what am I trying to chase? And well, am I looking for a title? Am I looking for some kind of a fixed mindset approach where I want to be part of something? I'll work with this football team that validates me on this level, or when I look back at that now, and just recently came across a book. I was reading a book called Mindset, which talks about growth or fixed mindsets. I look at that and I think, oof, that's quite confronting. This is a lot of what I can recognize was my approach. Kind of what I found myself doing was chasing titles or chasing some kind of status or, some kind of thing. And I think I was doing that at that time. And what I was maybe presenting as a passion was probably more about trying to pursue some kind of status at that time. So I just got hold of that. I think it was a good move at the time. Said, this isn't good for me. This isn't good for anyone. I want to go and do something else. So I came and took on a maternity leave cover job for 9 months, for years. So that'll get me through. And then 10 years have passed.
So just to go back to that then, so it's really, it's great that you acknowledge this is actually not good. Was there a point when you were thinking, shit, what have I done here? Like this is what I've based this on. Now what? Like, this is what I thought I wanted to do.
Yeah, definitely. You got that confronting moment where you think, probably you're still young enough to do different things. But yeah, for sure. And I think many people will have that experience. You think, is this kind of it to a point? What have I done? I've got on a fast track. And some of this is the problem with education as I see it. You're making decisions at 18, 19, 20, about your future career. When I was in Ireland, I was in the same week, Andy, I'm in school in the same week. I was doing registering on forms for universities of what I wanted to do for the rest of my life for a career at that moment. And on the same day, I was having to put my hand up to ask the teacher, could I go to the toilet? You think this is just not, you can't be making decisions about your future career. You're a child, all due respect to the 18 and 19-year-olds out there, but to be able to, and you're on that conveyor belt then, this is me for 4 years or 3 years, and then this, and then this. And at some point you come out the other side and you think, is this it? And I think it happens a lot in physiotherapy, actually. It's something I recognize. Physiotherapists will get to a point, maybe 5 years in or 6, 7 years in, and you think, what am I doing? What's next? Is this it? Is this all? There's a ceiling. And invariably, you've got really high performing people. You've got smart people who've been really, really successful academically. They've made it through a system. They've come out the other side and they're in physiotherapy practices. They're working with people every day. It's a pretty intense job, be it NHS or private, it's the same. And I think we can recognize that. My experience was with the football thing and pursuing your passion. Maybe I'm not fully sure if you could, I hear a lot about pursuing your passion in work. Maybe it's nice to have some separation as well. But from physiotherapists, I do recognize that you get to a point and there's that moment of reflection where you think, what's next and what have I done?
Yeah. And at what point, it's interesting now that you've moved into, you're out of the actual practicing field. Then did you have that business focus? Have you always had that, or at what point did that develop that you were interested in business and growth and mindset and so on?
I think it's probably one of those. At some point I was interested in business. I'd dabbled in different bits and pieces myself during university, etc. At one point, I had a stall selling Christmas jumpers that I had made abroad, and that was good fun. So I definitely had something about an interest in business and something entrepreneurial or something in me. I think maybe people have something in them where they want to just do something, problem solve, and I think that's been something I've been keen to pursue. But I didn't know where I wanted to go. There was no sense of I want to go here and then there and then there and then there and then there. And I think that's probably important for, in general, if physios do find themselves in a position where they think, what next? There's loads, but you don't necessarily know what you don't know. So I think there's a moment of rather getting to a point to think, what have I done? There is a moment of reflection. That's okay. What am I interested in? What can I get paid for? What am I good at? And pursuing it in that way. And I think that's something I find very helpful. So I've answered two questions there, which is probably unhelpful, but to think about, I just think it's important I don't think it's necessary to have a full plan. I think it's a bit restricting and maybe a bit boring to think this is it and then this and then this. I mean, at some point that's a bit depressing. So I think it's okay to have a rough idea of growth or pursue interests, whether business or clinical stuff or relationships or whatever, and see where you end up would be my approach. I think at some point the dots connect, and maybe that requires you to look back and think about where you came from. But I'm really sure that physiotherapists have fantastic skills and are really transferable skills into business in general. So I think my business interest has been there on some level. I said try different things, but physio is business. If we think about the roots of business, it's communicating with people. It's problem solving. It's listening to people. It's relationship building and managing. And I can't really think of a better career that preps you for that than working in physiotherapy. I really can't. You're dealing with people one-on-one, often back-to-back with problems, looking at you for a solution. You've got to have the answers. You're working as part of a team. The subject might be clinical. The subject might be anatomical, but the concept is the same. You've got leadership in that. You've got strategic thinking. You've got problem solving. You've got database decision making, sometimes with a limited data set. You've got stakeholder management. I mean, you can apply all the terminology from business to what we do as physiotherapists, and we can get carried away, but I think it's a really good training ground.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting perspective as well, because I think there is that conception, I'm a physio, I don't know about business. I hear that so often when I'm in these places, and I think, well, who does know about business anyway? It's like you don't need to, there's not always a formal training to open or run a business. You just do it, and then it's like, shit, what's that? How do you work? What's going on here with these things?
I think that probably resonates with a lot of people, Andy.
Yeah, no, it's interesting then. So at what point then, when did you start to angle towards this then, your current role? Like, what happened after that sports, the bit at Southampton?
So I moved into London eventually and came to work for Six Physio. Again, short-term vision on that. I was thinking, let's see where this takes me. Didn't really fancy going to NHS at that point. This sounds okay. So I found myself working in London, and then after a couple of years, I was working in a rehab role. My background was in strength and conditioning at that point, so I probably wasn't a very good manual-based physiotherapist, to be frank. So I was into the gym, the S&C side of things. So I found myself in a rehab role in a really nice team, met some nice people, worked in in the city in Monument. And after a couple of years, I became the clinic director in that team. Um, there's something about being in the right place at the right time. I have to be honest. It's not that I was, earmarked as a superstar with great management potential or skills. Certainly, that wasn't made. I wasn't made aware of that. But you do a good job and see where it takes you in general. So I turn up. I used to work, do a good job with patients, look after them. Generate a reasonable amount of revenue for the company, get some good reviews. I think you just do a good job and see where it takes you. So I found myself in that leadership role, and that was a big transition actually. So that's a very big step to move from being a clinician where your time is really quantifiable. The impact of your time is very quantifiable, I should say. We work in an hour or 30-minute slots, and we can say, in a very transactional level, that's the amount of revenue I've generated, that's the amount of value I've generated. I can be paid X, and it's quite clean. And then moving into a management leadership role, you're responsible now for that clinic and for the performance of that clinic, and you're responsible for the team, building a team, looking after a team, looking after those people. And the results of your effort are not necessarily as easily quantified, certainly not in the short term. And that, I think, is a big step for anyone moving from a clinical role into a non-clinical role or a more management type role. And it was quite difficult for me, or I found it quite difficult. Maybe that's me, but to lack that tangibility to what I'm doing. I often felt, am I doing anything? Am I doing the right job? And maybe that encroaches on imposter syndrome, which has different names, but that sense of, am I doing the right thing? I don't know.
And how did you deal with that?
Um,
Who did you ask that question to, like, if anyone?
if I'm doing the right thing.
Mm.
Well, I think there's a bit of reflection. There's a bit of self-reflection on that. But I wasn't working in isolation. I was working as part of a team. I had good people around me. So in work and out of work, just be able to talk to people. I think it's important to have a network of people, not just necessarily in work, but I think that's a big part of building resilience is having a group of people that you can talk to. And the more senior you get, I think the more important that is, the more lonely it is. So that kind of isolation of going from being a peer to managing peers in particular is quite confronting and does require an intentional approach, I would say. So yeah, talking to people, asking questions, having the bravery to say, look, I don't really know what I'm doing here. There's a certain performative aspect to leadership at some times where we confuse competence and competence, I think, competence and confidence. And we feel the need to maybe be confident and show that we have all the answers. But actually, I think it's really healthy and okay to not have the answers, but go and find out. If you don't know something, be proactive and figure it out. But you need to have that humility to say, look, I don't necessarily know if I'm doing the right thing. So, yeah, having that network around you is important in my mind.
Yeah, I know it definitely is because I think that thing of the expectation of people think you should know the answers. You're in charge, like tell me, and it's just like, I don't know. You're making it up so often. You're trying to do interesting things and also support people and not just give answers. It's just because you've got an answer doesn't mean it's right anyway. It's like there's a lot of different ways.
Yeah, so that's where I found myself, Andy, in that role. And then over time, another senior role came up, and I kind of found myself successful in an internal interview process. At that time, that was just after COVID, really. So COVID changed a lot of our business. We kind of lost a lot of good people. They went home to Australia, New Zealand, everywhere. And we had to close a couple of clinics. So it was quite a difficult time for every business really across the world, never mind just us. But on the back of that, we restructured a little bit of what we were doing. We had a couple of guys lined up to be in roles to lead our management team as we were growing as a company. And as they departed, I found myself not quite last man standing, but found myself in the right place at the right time. And again, just took on a role and then took that forward for a couple of years. That later became a COO role in the company as I worked more with the CEO directly, doing more of the operational stuff, taking responsibility for our specialist services, which we offer, a really, really fab part of our business, and trying to offer some guidance to the clinic directors that we had who are responsible for each clinic. And then found myself more recently just in the MD role as we restructure again. So as our CEO has left the business, that role has now become a managing director role, and that's part of a process where we were acquired by a bigger group a couple of years ago, 3 years ago now, and we're part of a bigger group, and we're a business in our own right. But as part of that group, I'm the managing director now. So yeah, I don't know. I think your question was how did I angle towards that? I don't know if I did angle towards it. It certainly wasn't intentional. I think a lot of people might resonate with that. Try and just show up, do a good job, and yeah, there's some intention to that. You want to progress. You've got to show your worth, show your value. You've got to solve some problems. You've got to do a good job, and then maybe make sure that people know you're doing a good job. And I think that's probably how you get forward. But that was certainly my experience.
Yeah. And like you did an MBA.
So a couple of years ago, got involved in an MBA study through Arden University, and that was during COVID. Actually, that was a great thing to do during COVID. Actually, because we weren't doing a huge amount of work, so that kept me sane. And yeah, that was a move towards trying to be more intentional and deliberate, recognizing that I lacked a lot of skills, I lacked a lot of exposure to the business vernacular, the thought processes, how to think, what is strategic thinking, what does it even mean, So I was confronted with as I was traveling through that Dunning-Kruger curve experience, I was confronted with this idea of, geez, I don't know a lot here, so I better go and do something. And I was able to access that through the apprenticeship levy, actually through our through work. So that was a great initiative to get part of.
Yeah. What did you think of an MBA? I was considering doing one a few years ago, and I couldn't commit the time to it. But I love the idea of it.
Yeah, I would say it depends what you want to get out of it. So there's a lot of MBAs around out there, and it's again, it comes down to this idea of fixed mindset for me, or this status piece. I've got this thing now, I'm validated, or now I'm here. So at some point that was probably the thinking, I need this to be this. And there's something about it allowing you to transfer skills. I think being a physiotherapist, you've got really good base skills, but then you want to qualify those, name them, get them on your CV, open up new opportunities if you did want to pivot into a different role within your company, or something external. So I think an MBA gives you that bridge. So that's one aspect of an MBA. It gives you that kind of foundational knowledge and a bridge to maybe transition into something different. There's a whole host of what we think of as MBAs, and some of them you could pay 100, 200, you could pay any money for an MBA. And I found a conversation with a friend of mine, interesting, or a friend of a friend who's done an MBA in Paris. It was one of the top MBAs. I think she paid about 200 grand to be part of this course. And I was asking her, what did you get out of it, or what did you find, as I was doing my course? And the content was the exact same. The recommendations, the case studies that she was talking about were completely what I was doing for an MBA that was costing me not a whole lot. But what she was getting out of it was the network, the prestige, the access to opportunities, internships, etc. I wasn't getting that. I did it through Arden University, which was fab for what I needed at that time. So a lot of it was digital, a lot of it was online, a lot of it was remote. I didn't make a fantastic connection of networks at that time. That's partly down to me and maybe not being as deliberate with that. But I got the content, and I got the learning, and it opened up a new way of thinking to me, and it set me down a bit of a rabbit hole of HBO articles, of podcasts, of just stimulating an interest in business or psychology or management principles, etc. So for me, I found it really interesting, Andy. But I think it's important, anyone who think about going into an MBA, is think about what do you want to achieve, what do you want to get out of it? Because if it is that networking piece, if it is that access piece, that MBA might not give you that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. It goes back to what you were saying before about these airlines say that it's the destination. Like, what are you doing it? You all sat on a plane, but then how is that different? So yeah, no, it's really interesting. And like from a Six Physio perspective, then, so you acquired recently. What are the plans for the business?
So our plans this year, we're looking to build. We're growing. We're looking to do more good physio in more places. We're looking to expand our core business. We're in a good place as a business. I think it's a period where we've got a fantastic team across the group. Clinically, our levels are really strong. Culturally, we're in a really good spot. So it's about expanding that now. So we're on a growth trajectory. We've just reopened St. James's Clinic on the 17th of March, so a couple of weeks ago as we're chatting. And that was a clinic that we opened just before COVID shut us down. It's been sitting vacant actually for the last couple of years, and we just got back in there. So that's fab. So we're back on the map there, and we're looking to do more of that this year. So we recognise a need. There's a huge need for what we do, for high quality physiotherapy that is, experiential, that is, has a customer service aspect to it. And we're looking to do that in more places. So doing the basics really well and doing more of that. That's really our plan this year.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's really good to hear. And like you mentioned the book earlier on, like in terms of your own continuous professional development, like I've always loved getting a good book recommendation. So is there anything that you'd recommend?
Well, I've just started a book a couple of weeks ago, and I'm not sure if I'm ready to recommend it, but it's the one that I've just started, so I'll give you that. I'll give you a couple actually. I'll give you the one that I most recently started, which is called Tiny Experiments, and it just came out, and it's an interesting one, and it's kind of an anti-goal setting book. And I wanted to read it because I've been thinking about goals and the the purpose of goals recently. And do we need goals or fixed goals, or what's it all about? And I'm flipping and flopping between the value of having goals or actually just having a rough guide. And so I picked up this book, which is very much just, why don't you try this? Why don't you try that? And experimental stuff. So I'm not ready to recommend that just yet because I'm only a couple of chapters in. I have a 1-year-old, so I haven't got a huge amount of time for it at the moment. And it's good, but it's interesting so far. In terms of books from a business perspective that I recommend to anyone who's going into a leadership role, that transition is really difficult from not being a leadership role into a leadership role. And I recommend a book called The First 90 Days. And it was actually the book that this friend of a friend who studied a £200,000 MBA recommended me. And I already had it, which was very comforting. She said, the best thing I got was this book. It's fantastic. It was great. I was like, it is a good book. I've got it. It was £8. So I saved a few quid and it's great. So it's a really practical guide to management leadership. And it talks about the first, 90 days in a role. What should you do? What should you not do? And I think that's a really good book to revisit every now and again. So if you've not got that one, for anyone who's in a leadership role or aspiring to one, I really recommend that. Really genuinely, it's a very, very good one. So maybe there's 1.5 recommendations. I'll come back to you on Tiny Experiments.
Yeah, no, please do. No, they're good. I've not done either of those. I mean, I'm a big believer in that 90 days. We work on the EOS model of traction. I don't know if you've come across that book. And that's all about having big rocks for quarters and working on that basis.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of overlap with these things, isn't it? A lot of them use the same sort of methodology, and and I think it's also it's an interesting about that goal setting because I can empathize. I've been running the company for 13 years, and it's depends what part of the day sometimes is like, I want to be doing that, I want to be doing that, and you can change, and it's nice having that creativity. However, you do need to have the business being sustainable and still working as well. So it's always an interesting balance.
Yeah, I think so. I think I'll see where I get back to goals. I think at this moment in time, I think it's important to have goals, but not to be so bound to those at the expense of other interesting pursuits.
Yeah. No, good. Yeah, well, I'd like to hear more about that one once you've finished it. And then finally, what would your advice be? I mean, I've made loads of notes here, so you've given a lot, but if you were going to give advice to someone either new looking into this sort of area or just someone who's more established in general.
In terms of what area? So in terms of leadership?
Just like if you're a let's say physio and you're starting out your career, like what would your advice be to people?
I think be intentional with what you do. I think it's difficult to say I want to be here. The idea of a 5-year plan, 10-year plan, I find really confronting and really difficult. So it's not a question I would tend to ask people, but having a rough direction and being intentional to pursue that, I think is a good idea. I think it's important to do meaningful work. Personally, I'm not 100% sure about the idea of finding purpose in your work. I think it's different than meaning. I think it can be very conflated and unrealistic to say this is purpose or describe purpose. And this is something that we see a lot in literature lately, is this idea of pursuing purpose or finding purpose. I actually think it's just more interesting to find meaning and find meaning in the small interactions and find meaning in progress. So I think when I talk about being intentional, it's about taking stock of, where do you want to go, what do you want to get out of this as well, or what do you want to do. And if you don't know, then part of your journey is to pursue as well, rule things out, rule things in. So I think having a growth mindset, being open to opportunities, having a rough direction to travel of where you want to get to and why, making sure that that why is clearly answered in your own mind. Why am I doing what I'm doing? What am I looking to do here? As you set out in anything, whether that's a new role or a new leadership role, I think being intentional and deliberate with that is going to set you well.
Great. Yeah, no, really enjoyed that whole talk there. I think there's so much interesting topics, and it can see your enthusiasm and excitement for the industry and for what you're doing. And I think it's great to see, because there is a lot of uncertainty from the business aspect of things. There's always a lot of negativity, which it drives me up the wall. I mean, actually, just in terms of that, like, how are you feeling from that perspective? Because but there's always negativity around budgets and the economics, national insurance, all of that. How have you responded to that?
Yeah, look, it's a good question. It's a perennial issue, isn't it? But I mean, it's contemporary now. I mean, this is our reality. So I'd approach these things. What can we affect? What can we not? Reductive, but it's practical. I think, what can we affect? What can we not? What's within our control? And I think where we find ourselves in reality in the UK is we're operating in a space that is in demand. We're solving problems for people. Their access to services elsewhere is limited, and what we do is really good. And as long as what we do is really good and valuable, we'll be okay. So I think as we move forward as a business, there's price pressures, there's challenges with what insurance companies will pay for physio and what they value physio at. And there's a bit of a race to the bottom on that, because it's less and less they're chipping away. And we just can't provide high quality physio and pay our people what they deserve to be paid, make sure people have career progression opportunities, and it's a great place to work, unless we're generating revenue that speaks to those needs. So we've got challenges like every other business does, but our challenges are mapped out in the sense of, we've got to do really good work that's of real value, and we've got to communicate that value with people. So we've got a real focus on customer service, customer experience, and I say customer deliberately. We've got to think of ourselves as solving problems for people, collaborating with our patients and our customers, and making sure there's shared value in what we do.
Brilliant. Yeah, great way to finish on that. I think that was really well articulated on it. So Eddie, thank you very much for this. I hope you get enough sleep. And actually, give me your favourite ever Liverpool player.
Ooh, do you know what? It's just about, I think nostalgia gives you a tinted lens. I'm going to go Mo Salah. We've got to live in the moment. I think we end up putting a nostalgia tax on what went before, but this guy is unbelievable.
Do you think, what are your thoughts on the contract negotiations?
I think it's done. I think he'd be mad to go. I think Trent is gonna go. I think he's gone. And I think Virgil and Mo will stay. And I think the reason it hasn't been announced is I think it just puts pressure on Trent if they only announce two of them. So I think they'll stay. I hope they'll stay, but I think it's probably done.
I'd quite like Salah to leave, to be honest, because he's
maybe go to Everton, new stadium coming up. He might fancy a change. He wouldn't have to move house.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's true. Yeah, Benitez tried that one, and that didn't work out well for us. Yeah, look, Eddie, thank you very much for your time on that. Really enjoyed it.
All right, Andy, thanks for yours. Appreciate it.